Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome in. Great to see everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you all so much for being here today. We've got some very special guests with me. We're going to be talking with the development team for the upcoming JRPG for a Vast Future. We're going to be playing the demo as well, and I'm very, very excited to be talking with these fine fellows this morning. Just so you know, because this is an interview, I'm not going to be reading every chat message like I usually do. So there's going to be a little bit less interaction there, but we will be looking at chat for questions. So if you would like to ask questions about the developers here, please just drop a message in chat and we'll try and get to it at some point. Yeah, I think that's it from me. So I'm going to unmute the devs here and I'll have each of them introduce themselves. Josh, you want to go first?
I'm Josh, as the name Josh suggests. I'm kind of the lead developer, as it were, programmer, composer / general point of contact for the game. We started retro games about 3 years ago, and this is our second title that we've been working on. And we've been incrementally improving and streamlining our process ever since. And our whole thing, I would say, is that we try to make retro-styled games, as the name suggests, but we try to streamline the process, make them a little bit more accessible, faster paced, kind of like all the cool parts without any of the dumb parts. So, yeah, it's about capturing the spirit of some of the old games, but taking out some of the tedium and unnecessary difficulty.
Heck yeah, thank you. Leo Grimm, you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, I go by Leo Grimm, real name Benedict. I joined the project as level designer and then just had my responsibilities grow. I joined with this project into Retrox Games and I was a tester on the previous game.
Super cool. That's awesome. And Andy, last but not least, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm Andy. I have been with retro games since I started it with Josh. We did our previous project, Pillars of Dust, and this is the second one. I'm primarily the writer for this one. I did some of the graphics and some of the other early stuff in the game, some of which is still in there and some of which isn't, but mainly I've been doing the dialogue and the writing and that kind of stuff.
Heck yeah. That's awesome. And how long have each of you been working in game development? And that could be like developing games or playtesting or other sorts of game development adjacent positions.
If we consider like from the very beginning, probably 20 plus years. I literally started probably when I was like 11 or 12 with RPG Maker 2000 off of some random website, and I've kind of been at it ever since. And it led to sort of my career, really, into software engineering.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, kind of a game dev lifer.
Love to hear that. Leo Grimm?
I'm not that long into game dev, at least not compared to Josh. I started probably with Pillars of Dust as tester. That was like starting late 2019, early 2020. And since then, I have been testing a lot of games. Being a level designer on this game was a first for me. But from what people thought so far, I think I did hopefully a good job. I also moderate now with a most marvelous person called Fletch.
That's true.
I don't know if you have heard of them. They're most amazing person.
Thank you. I will keep your flattery into consideration. Andy, what about you?
I think that probably my first like involvement in actual like game development was when me and Josh started working on the previous project. Like I'm not like a programmer or anything, so I don't really have any of that skill set. So when we started like brainstorming the previous game and then started actually making that was probably my first involvement in development.
Sweet.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great. I think it's really cool how there's like a broad range of like experiences and time spent in the field represented here. I really like that y'all have a somewhat diverse, I don't know, experiences, and the things that you bring to the table feel like they would add a lot to the game dev experience. I know a lot of smaller studios that have like just programmers, and to be honest, not every programmer knows how to write a narrative very well. And so I don't know, having a variety of people and experiences definitely helps make the game a lot better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's been one of our greatest assets is that uh, when you have sometimes you have a bunch of people who've been working on games forever, uh, they sort of get locked into a certain mentality. So when you have
Sure.
sort of outside perspectives or uh, just people who can think outside the box in general, it really makes for a better development cycle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right. Do you want to continue answering questions, or I'm kind of itching to get into this demo. I have not spoiled it for myself during all the prep work. So, um, is there like a lot of dialogue that happens at the beginning that we sit through and then continue answering questions later, or do you think uh, we could continue the interview while I start?
There's a fair amount of dialogue, but it's mostly kind of exposition. It's
Cool.
I don't think any sort of uh,
There's not a
major
huge
beats.
amount of dialogue at the beginning compared maybe to some things, but there's a little bit.
Okay. Okay. Well, why don't I start? And if we need to skip past some things, you story and exposition experts can help catch us up to the story so far when the gameplay begins.
Perfect.
Perfect. I chose the T palette. I really appreciated that y'all had different palettes to choose from when I started the game. Uh, I really like this palette for my own eyesight. It's very nice and soft, so I appreciate you giving us a choice there.
Yeah, that was kind of one of our understated best features.
No, I mean like playing Gato Roboto and some other games that have palette swaps. I always think that's a really, really cool feature, especially from just like an accessibility perspective, because some people really struggle with like vibrant colors or things that are too similar to each other. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think we were going for kind of I mean, at least when we started working on this, going for a Game Boy type of feel to it, but
sure.
more like Game Boy Color, which used to be able to like switch the palette by pressing, I forget what button it was you had to press to change the palette for. So like if you played an original Game Boy game on Game Boy Color, you could change to like 10 different palettes or something. So I
Oh,
think that's where
dang.
that idea came from originally.
Sure, that makes
And
sense.
then we did a Twitter poll to determine the default palette, and that was a lot of fun. So we put down all those palettes you can choose from in the beginning, and we just had people vote which one was their favorite, and then we use that as a default palette.
Okay, yeah. Which one won?
Uh, well, it's called default, but it was
Oh,
it's based on the Super Game Boy default palette
okay.
actually, and that was like a weird peripheral back in the day that let you play your Game Boy games on a Super Nintendo, so you could see it on the actual TV, and
Okay.
it had like a sort of orangish color scheme that you'd see for the default palette here, and it sort of worked nicely because the game has a gritty, sort of like rusty tone to it, so it almost accentuates that.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, when I was looking at the Steam page, seeing the like black, orange, and white colors, it definitely felt like you said, like rusted and like futuristic in that way. So it felt like just that like first cover photo like really set the tone for the game.
Yeah, awesome.
This message must be a decade old. Oh no. All right, looks like we're gonna hunt for some scrap here at the beginning. Gonna wake up our friend Garby. I love the name Garby. It's amazing.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of strange names throughout both of the games that we've done. they
Particularly
kind of
Pillars of
just
Dust.
they're just like born out of our strange imaginations.
That's amazing. I love that. I don't know. Sometimes I get bored when I see a RPG like this, and all the names are like Steve, Carl. I don't know. It just like it feels like you jumped into a name generator and just took the top 5 off the list.
Right. Yeah, there's Josh, what are trying to think of another goofy name that was in the like Pillars of Dust.
There
Strange
was
one.
a gravestone in a town in that game, and it just says Grandpappy Blunker.
I
And
love
every time I
that.
see it, I just laugh.
That's
We were
amazing.
having like I was playing through that game and I was like, who wrote this? And Josh was like, I think it was you. And I'm like, I have no memory of coming up with that.
That's so funny. So, how long ago was Pillars of Dust finished? It sounds like that was your previous game. Um,
Yep.
to you starting on this project.
So Pillars of Dust released, I think, literally the same day the COVID started in the US, like when
Oh,
everything shut
okay.
down.
Dang.
That
It was
wasn't
like
really
the
a
day.
great start. Um, but yeah, I'd say mid-March 2020.
Okay. Was that good
And
timing for sales? I feel like everyone was starting to get bored around that time.
not for us.
It
Oh
wasn't.
no.
It probably could have been a little bit better. Like everybody had a little bit of time to play games, so there's that. But like I think that it was like literally like at the same time. So like people were just getting used to the fact that they were probably at home when they weren't before.
Sure.
I
That
don't
makes
know
sense.
what the total impact was, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it really impacted it negatively or positively. It was just sort of symbolically a strange time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pick up
but
some
all
crap.
three of us worked on that. It was mostly me and Josh who developed the game, but then Leo got involved when he was testing that game and getting more involved, and then that's kind of how he got into this project as well.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So really, this game for Vast Future sort of became a spiritual successor in the sense that it's built off the same code base
Okay.
as Pillars of Dust, but it actually started off with a much different set of goals and systems, and then it sort of organically turned back into a Pillars of Dust style game.
Interesting. Does that feel like I don't know, what was that creative process like where you said it like merged from like a different set of ideas and goals and then like it came back into uh something that was similar to what you had made before? Like was that something that felt positive to you in the long run or was it just like you felt like you were settling back into what you knew how to do?
I think it was positive for the most part. When we started the project, it was just me and Andy, and we had some pretty lofty goals and out there ideas. We were going to do fully automatic battles, and I actually
Okay.
worked for months on this battle system with like custom AIs for everyone, and you could switch the AI system on the fly for each character,
Oh, dang.
and then you could intercept the automated battles to throw in power ups and stuff. But it just seemed too experimental or risky,
Sure.
and we were getting kind of mixed feedback from people.
Okay.
And
Yeah, it was kind of like based on the popularity of like idle games where people, for whatever reason, those are like super popular apparently, where you don't really do anything; it just plays itself. So like we'll have idle battles, but then the feedback was not great. Like I think people, it was just like it didn't really fit into the JRPG type of format as
Sure.
well as we thought it might.
Sure.
yeah, and there was no ammo system or crafting or anything at that point in time. So it was kind of like a meat and potatoes JRPG with automatic battles. And it was influenced one of my big influences was the Final Fantasy Legend series for the Game Boy, which are really experimental and uh, really numbers oriented, for lack of a better word. So like every single thing you use has limited uses.
Okay.
There's a lot of like wonky subsystems for leveling up that aren't just strictly experience based. It's really hard to explain, but it was sort of like Pokemon before Pokemon.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I always wanted to capture the vibe of those games personally, but then I realized that they aren't fun to everyone.
Sure, sure. That makes sense. I think it's really cool how you started innovating and you got some player feedback, and then you realized that maybe it wasn't an idea that you wanted to continue with. Um, I don't know. I think that like trying out new ideas is really important, but also not being too attached to them if it doesn't look like it's going to work out well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because if your insider people or your Discord members or inner circle are telling you it's not good, then what is the general public going to say?
That's fair.
So I prefer to sort of adapt on the fly and be open-minded than just stubbornly stick to something that would backfire.
Sure.
It's always a kind of a push and pull. Like, on the one hand, you want to try to make something innovative or try to push the push the limits a little bit or do something that people haven't done before, but at the same time, you don't want to do something that nobody wants to play. So
Sure.
you kind of have to, like, we definitely had like a lot of internal, amongst the three or four of us talking about what we wanted to do with this and whether we wanted to stick with our original plan or if we wanted to change it. Because I feel like I probably wanted to stick with that auto battle system
Sure.
even after we heard some negative feedback, just because it was like originally one of the things that we intended to do with it. But
Sure.
it's trying to incorporate feedback at the same time as staying true to what we wanted to do. And so it's hopefully we found the right mix, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I don't envy you being put in that position.
yeah, and really the biggest challenge is when you have a small team, doing sort of open world, anything goes style gameplay is extremely hard to balance and get right.
Sure.
Uh, so I think we compromised a little bit on that philosophy and made it. I don't want to say totally linear, but we focused more on having a curated experience.
Okay.
I don't know how else to describe it, but uh, we wanted to make it the whole world much more open and you could sort of explore wherever you wanted. And it was just a nightmare to balance and
Yeah.
figure out how to convey the plot and everything doing that.
Yeah, we had to rein in the scope a little bit. I mean, since like Josh said, it's kind of a small project. Like, there's four people. Obviously we've had some additional assistance from various people. We brought in some freelance for some of the graphics and stuff, but mainly four people working on it.
Sure.
So some of the goals that we initially had, we had to scale back a little bit because we had talked about Final Fantasy Legend specifically being like a major influence, obviously in the like four color palette that we use for the Game Boy color system and
Right,
that kind of
right.
thing.
Yep.
But then we also like talked about the Fallout games, like the open world and kind of like the setting of those games is kind of influential in this, but
Okay.
obviously we couldn't do like a massive Fallout style open world situation with
Sure.
the scope of the people we had working on it and the time constraints and everything.
Sure.
Yeah. So I would say maybe 4 to 6 months into development, uh, we brought in Leo. So to give some context, Andy was saying Leo is a tester on Pillars of Dust. So much so that he kind of became like a legendary tester in the community
Heck yeah.
because he did such a phenomenal job testing that game to the point where I almost didn't need anyone else to test. So he really rose to the occasion,
Dang.
and I just kept a mental note in my head, like, this guy is legit. And I think I was doing a lot of the map design early on, but I'm not very good at making maps,
Sure.
to put it politely. And everything I was making was really blocky and uninspiring. And it was just sort of overwhelming to do music and program and map and everything.
Right,
So
right.
um, I didn't know that Leo had sort of like a innate ability to do great maps, but I just asked to bring him on the project, sort of as a goodwill offering for all the testing work he did. And I think he really rose to the occasion and provided really good level design. And then he even got into sort of helping with system design and
Okay.
providing a lot of feedback in that sense too. So yeah, I think it really helped to bring in some different members.
Yeah, I
Another
mean,
person,
Leo basically became part of the team as he was testing the game. Like
Wow.
he kind of, and then so then it just made sense to bring him in on this one.
That's awesome.
yeah, and I was gonna say we also brought in Kren, or Tomy as he's called in real life, on art, who's someone I've been talking to for a very long time. And it was just a similar thing where uh, a lot of our connections were born from online communities or sort of working on projects that never really took off.
Sure.
And he did all of the enemy designs, and he's refining some of the tile designs currently. And he has a totally different perspective than the three of us in terms of his influences. So we're
Okay.
sort of putting everything in the cauldron, and this is what's come out.
Heck yeah. That's
It
awesome.
made sense. This project was definitely like we wanted it to be more ambitious than the previous one that was really just two people working on it in their spare time, basically. And like
Sure.
I did almost all of the art in the previous game, but I'm far from a pixel artist, so like you can tell from that game that it's very rudimentary. Um, we were going for like that lo-fi NES level of
Yeah.
graphics, but we definitely wanted to have a more polished feel to this game. So adding Kren to this, as well as, I mean, Leo's done some of the tile graphics as well, and I think they're all, a lot better than the previous game. So I think the result has been pretty satisfying.
That's great. Leo Grimm, what's your experience been like working on this team, having been a really influential tester on the last game?
It was a challenge, mostly because the game itself wasn't like my full day. It was like, on the other hand, I like test stuff, I moderate stuff. I have my fingers in a lot of pies,
For sure.
so to speak. And as such, it was a huge challenge to balance that all. But it was fun doing a lot of the dungeons, even if at times it felt like laying the track I'm driving on,
Okay, sure.
where I had to think up what is the whole dungeon about. Like, I know the overall story, but like, what is the purpose of every room and such? So I had to do a lot of dungeon designing, map making, to the point that like none of the original maps I think survived.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yep, that's
It's
true.
a very different game from what it was at the beginning, which is
Yeah.
probably standard for projects like this. But
Sure.
I think Leo's right about, everybody's got their own day job. Like this is just a small part of everybody's day, and like that's one of the challenges of being a small dev team is like sometimes people, some people are working while others are like not available. If that makes sense. Like
Sure.
I know there's a period of time where I just could not focus on working on the game, so I kind of just disappeared for a period of time because I just had a lot of other stuff going on. I just had a baby, like started a
Congrats.
new job, all that kind of stuff. So everybody's got to pick up the slack when people are unable to work. So that's one of the challenges for sure doing something like this.
Right. And y'all aren't doing this as your full-time job paying yourself a salary, right? This is part-time whenever you get the chance to work on it. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yes.
And to kind of make things even more tricky, my first project, for example, was Shadows of Adam. That's something classic, and it was a lot higher budget because we were backed on Kickstarter.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Uh, but the whole point of retro games was to be a little bit more lo-fi, and I don't know, just sort of like off kilter, weird by design. But we're basically self-budgeting these projects, so
Okay.
um, obviously we can't get quite the same level of assets as like a flagship project.
Sure. Of
But
course.
it kind of makes it more fun, because you have to think creatively and strategically about how you want to convey the world.
Definitely. No, that totally makes sense. What are so it looks like I'm wandering around a abandoned biomedical research facility. Uh, I don't know how easy this would be to do without giving away too many spoilers, but like, what's the story so far up to this point? What it sounds like we're set in the world of Seralia. Is that how I say that? Seralia?
Yeah,
Okay.
either one's fun.
And so, like, what's been going on in the game world up until the point where we saw the first scene?
So there's a lot of backstory in this game that kind of gets told through some I don't know what you want to call it, but like if you investigate, if you look at computers and filing cabinets and stuff, and talk to people throughout the game, then you kind of piece together what's been happening. But
Sure.
the short story is that there's been some sort of war that occurred before the game started. You're starting in a town that's been kind of, it's on the outskirts of the country. It's been further away from where the like actual fighting happened, but there's I mean, a lot of the people who live in the town are like their parents went off to war or that kind of thing. The main character, her parents, she's been living by herself basically in this town because her parents went off to war and didn't come back, and
Okay.
that's like a kind of her starting point. And she's like growing up in this town, and she's kind of like become like a scrap collector as a way
Sure.
to survive. And that's what you find her doing at the beginning of the game is she's looking for some valuable stuff that's left over at this building that she got access to.
Okay. Really cool. And it looks like we're set in the year 3062 or sometime after. Um,
Yeah, slightly after that, I think, but
okay.
yeah, that's around the time.
Great. Is this still planet Earth, or are we in some other world and or planet, or is it like fantasy where it's completely different? Like,
It's kind of not super defined. Like
okay,
it's kind of left up to the player what they want to see it as, but I would say it's probably a different planet from planet Earth, just like a different setting entirely. But
sure.
obviously, it's got some parallels to real life.
That's great. That's great. I find that like JRPGs are often set in the past or in a fantasy setting, so I think it's really interesting that this one's set in the future. I can't say that I have a ton of experience with JRPGs in general, but the ones that I've played have definitely been set in those sorts of settings. So I'm excited to see this one set in the future and get a different feel from it. What sorts of design considerations have you been working with? What sorts of constraints do you have put on the project, or does your game engine limit you to what are you working with here?
Yeah, so probably the most immediate one is the four color palette.
Sure.
That totally self-imposed, just a stylistic thing.
Okay.
Engine wise, I wouldn't say there's any constraints in that sense. So pretty much all the constraints were design constraints. I think we're aiming for a shorter game than a typical RPG in general.
Okay.
Sort of our mantra at something classic in retro games is like JRPGs for people with jobs. So something you
I
can sink your
appreciate
teeth
that.
into.
As someone with a full-time
Um,
job, I don't know that I have time for a full-length JRPG anymore. So
yeah, exactly. So you kind of get that experience, but you don't have to sink in like 100 hours or your entire summer or whatever
sure.
to get through it.
Are there any musical constraints, either real or self-imposed? It sounds like it's chiptune in the background.
Yeah, so that's self-imposed too. Those are all MP3s or similar format. So
Okay.
I'm not using like a tracker or authentic hardware or anything. It's done in FL Studio and
Okay, great.
Style.
Love FL Studio.
Yeah, that's I've been using that for years. I haven't found anything as usable as it, honestly.
That's great. Are there narrative-based constraints? You said that you wanted this game to be shorter than a traditional JRPG. Are there anything else that you're considering other than like length of time it takes to tell a story?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had a more ambitious plan for the story as well in this, and we kind of cut it down to a more linear and, just something that has an actual impact that you can actually understand in the space of playing the game. And we definitely had to like get way more focused than we were originally with some of the side quests and some of the areas that we had planned for the open world that we cut out.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Looks like we've got scrolling dialogue. Has it been difficult to find sentences that fit within the box, or?
I kind of just wrote the programming so it puts it up automatically. Sometimes that backfires, and there might be like a single word on the second box and stuff like that.
Gotcha,
But I
sure.
think those are the things we're trying to clean up during beta testing.
Okay.
Yeah, we can catch those things as we go along.
That's great. I think that's the perfect way to do it. Um, is it a fixed resolution game and then it just scales to whatever the window size is, or do you like support widescreen monitors?
Yeah, it's a widescreen by default,
Okay.
so it's just a 16:9
Okay.
ratio and scales up.
So if I was playing on
Uh,
an ultra wide monitor, I might get some black bars or something.
yeah, I think it's mostly constrained by width, so the black
Okay.
bars will be vertical. And
Okay.
that was a harsh lesson learned from past projects. Is we tended to do like a 3:2 type of resolution that didn't scale up
Oh,
nicely,
sure.
and that was by far the biggest complaint about those games.
That makes sense. Looks like I'm trapped in this room. Try opening up the computer.
Yeah, from my side, the biggest restraints probably were assets.
Yep.
Like,
Okay.
I had to reshuffle assets a lot to like make different roads, like roads that feel different, and like indoor areas that feel different enough that you know you're in a different place.
Sure. Are you limited in your
Al-
palette scope? Like you only get, I don't know, 64 tiles to work with for the entire game, or is that somewhat unrestricted for you?
it's unrestricted in how many tiles you have. Like,
Okay.
as long as someone makes it, you can use it.
Okay.
Which meant like sometimes I didn't have what I needed and I needed to make something new. For example, in this facility, to make it easier to know in what kind of building you are, I made some custom walls
Oh,
compared to
interesting.
like the standard walls.
No, that's really cool. I think that sort of like finding out what you're missing just by experimentation, um, and then adding that in on the fly is like really important skill to have for game development.
Yeah, the problem was like time, budget, and like what you wanna do. Because like time-wise, we run full time on the game. Budget-wise, we couldn't outsource it either. So it's like I had to really, really think hard what I really, really want, and only order that,
Sure. No, that totally makes
or
sense.
like make it myself.
Right.
And we're
Oh.
still in that process. Like I'm noticing things in this game, this form of the game right now that you're playing, where there's already some things that are going to be added. Like that tube that just broke, that's going to be animated in the future. Like the bubbles are going to be
Oh,
flowing up to the top of the tube and that
super
kind of stuff.
cool. Okay. How recently was this demo released, and how far away do you project the final release date to be?
So the demo, I think we released for the Steam Next Fest around February.
Okay, great.
So it's a little outdated in terms of quality of life changes and some general polish.
Sure.
It's still the same game basically. Um, and we're aiming for a final release, I want to say first or second week of November. So it's
Oh,
the
dang, that's
game's
close.
done. We're just testing it and polishing it currently.
That's great news. That's awesome. You heard it here, everybody. November, get ready. Let's see. Okay. Do you each have a favorite character from the game? If it gets too spoilery, you can just mention them broadly. But are there any like fun moments or special touching scenes that make a character stand out to you?
I like them all equally. I mean, I think I like Darius the most personally.
Okay.
Darius is you learn something about him. I mean, I don't know how much of a surprise it is when you get to it at some point. He learns something about himself. I guess that's I don't want to give away too many spoilers. I don't know if people care, but basically, without giving too much away, you can tell from his portrait there. I mean, you don't even know his name yet. His name is question marks right now, but his name's Darius.
Perfect.
You can tell that he's some sort of a robot. He's got like a metal head with one eyeball, basically.
Heck yeah.
But he sees himself as a human.
Interesting.
He sort of comes to terms with the fact that he is not really a living being at some point during the game.
Sure. Is that developed in a way that's humorous, or I mean, I played a game that looks at robots believing they're human and slowly coming to grips with that, and it's more of like a psychological horror game. Like
Not as horrific as that.
Okay.
This is, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like, I forget what's the word, situational irony.
Sure.
I mean, like
sure.
I said, you know from the beginning that this guy is like a robot, basically. But like
Right.
throughout the game, he sort of learns for himself. He's like, he finds out stuff about himself that you were probably not surprised to find out,
Sure.
which makes it sort of humorous, sort of touching, maybe. But definitely not, I wouldn't call it like, it's not like a horror type of situation.
Okay.
I don't think that's surprising to anybody except maybe him.
Really, really cool. So it looks like fight is going to decrease my ammo, and ammo is shared across the team. Okay, cool. And then we can reload.
Yeah, that was sort of one of our curveballs, was the ammo system.
Yeah. Do you want to explain it in more detail?
Yeah, so rather than the typical RPG sort of fight magic paradigm, we wanted to emphasize the theme of scarcity, because it's sort of like a post-war type of place.
Sure.
So there's no in-game currency, there's no traditional shops,
Okay.
no one knows magic. So it's sort of gritty and realistic in the sense that they're literally just using scrap and bullets, kind of how people in any situation would. So basically there's basic ammo, which is the default, and then as the game progresses you get specialized ammo, which they can do certain things like AoE damage
Okay.
or inflict status ailments. So they're
Awesome.
almost like modifiers to regular attack. And then you also have consumable items, which we call war gear, which
Okay.
functions similar to how skills would in other RPGs.
Sure.
So those let you do more targeted elemental damage or spread damage or buffs or really a little bit of everything.
Okay, so it sounds like as the game progresses, we're going to be given a lot of tools to overcome some of these battles. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I really like being given a variety and then being left to be creative with what to do with it. So I really appreciate that.
yeah, and we thought it would be something a little bit outside the norm for how you approach RPGs.
Sure, right. I mean, the RPGs that I've played in the past, I get one overleveled character and then I just spam a skill until the battle ends. Which kind of like railroad tracks the whole encounter.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's great. Are there random encounters in this game? Will I encounter people just walking around, or is it generally scripted points of time that you throw a battle at the players?
So it's a combination of I would call it like earthbound encounters. You see people walking around, and when you get in a certain radius of their line of sight, they start moving towards you more aggressively.
Okay.
And then there are some forced encounters. We do sort of a spoof on the Pokemon trainers where they're sort of pivoting in circles, and if they see you, an exclamation mark shows up over the head and they walk towards you.
That's awesome.
So yeah, a combination of those two.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the Earthbound encounter is the best way to describe it. Like that's anybody who's played Earthbound is going to recognize when the enemies are walking around and they start running towards you when you go by. And that's kind of a thing that was present in the Pillars of Dust game too. We used it there first because we didn't really want to do just straight up random encounters. So we figured that was kind of like a nice little alternative option.
Sure.
So, interestingly enough, early on in one of the first demos, I was experimenting with random encounters for this game, and I hated it. So
For
we
sure.
brought back the traditional Earthbound style that we've been using.
Okay, great.
However, I will say that there are some indie games that do random encounters pretty well. Like the Cthulhu Saves the World series. Those type of games, they have finite random encounters where you might have 20 encounters per area or something like that.
Oh, sure.
And once you do those 20 encounters, then there's no forced encounters anymore, or you can just call a battle on demand if you want. And it's really smooth system.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah, it definitely works for some games. It's just we didn't really want to do it that way for whatever reason. But
For sure. And again, as someone who has a full-time job and plays games, when I get the chance, random encounters can really make a game drag. Just because I'm trying to get something done and get through the narrative and experience a good story, and I just keep fighting the same 3 goblins over and over again in the woods.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it kind of lends itself to a speedrunning strategy as well because you're not forced to have battles. Like you can if you're strategic with how you move in this game, you can avoid as many battles as you want because you can dodge the enemies.
Sure.
And that definitely factors in. Like there's a little bit of a strategy depending on whether you want to accept battles or not.
Yeah, and that was actually something we found out with Pillars of Dust is that it was pretty speedrunner friendly, almost by accident, and we really wanted to continue that theme for Vast Future.
Sure. No, that's great. What are some inspirations? I've heard Earthbound come up a couple times, and you had mentioned Pokemon trainers. Do you have any specifically JRPG inspirations that you look to when you're thinking about the game?
Yeah, I think all three of us could answer. I'll say from my perspective, it was Gen 1 Pokemon mixed with Final Fantasy Legend series.
Okay.
Yeah, Final Fantasy Legend for sure was a major influence. I think that the setting is kind of like anybody who's played Final Fantasy Legend, I think that they had a different name in Japan, if I'm not mistaken. Like they weren't even really part of the Final Fantasy universe.
Yeah,
And they have
Saga.
they have like a gritty kind of a sci-fi setting to them. Like there's cyborgs and stuff in those games.
Okay.
That's just very different from the Final Fantasy sort of. I mean, there's definitely sci-fi elements in the other Final Fantasy games too, but Legend in particular, it's almost no fantasy, almost all like sci-fi style, and that's kind of what we're doing with this one too. Like, there's not a lot of, you don't see a lot of like swords in this game. Like, it's mostly futuristic lasers and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I feel like that, and also Fallout, like I mentioned before, was kind of guiding, at least for the aesthetic, if not the actual like game design.
Leo Grimm, when you're
Also, maybe
making...
Bioshock
Sorry.
is another one. Sorry,
Bioshock.
Bioshock. Just like the way that they express the story in the Bioshock games through like you collect recordings that you can listen to and that kind of thing.
Sure.
I try to capture that. Don't know if I succeed, but that was another thing I had in mind.
No, I mean, as I've been walking around and looking in file cabinets and things, I really appreciate getting government documents and things like that that explain a little bit more about what's going on.
Right, and that's kind of left up to the individual player, like, depending on how much you care about the story. Like, you can make your way through this game, you don't have to read any of those side documents, really, and you can probably still figure out what's happening. But if you're more interested in some of the backstory, then you can explore a little bit more and you'll get a better idea.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's awesome. Looks like this guy has a
For
room for a
me-
head. sorry, Leo Grimm.
For me, there were like a lot of inspirations because like I basically took from everywhere. JRPG wise, I would say the only game that really had influence on any of the maps was Golden Sun.
Okay.
I'm a huge Golden Sun fan. But else you also see like influence from like Soviet era personality cults, like the statues, the secret government facilities and such. You see influences from Fallout with like all the crafting. You see, strangely enough, influence from the Metro games
Oh, interesting.
with the whole bullets, because like you haven't seen it right now, but like basic bullets act basically also as currency. Because
Okay.
like at some point I was like, we have currency and we have some basic bog standard ammo. Why don't we combine that? And I did it.
Heck yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
And I think that's where Leo really helped the development process. Is I'm kind of like a RPG traditionalist, and he really helped challenge some of those traditions. And I think as a result, we have some systems that I feel are pretty unique for this type of game.
That's awesome. Having people to like challenge your ideas is definitely really important. I've done a little game development myself, and having people tell me like this really does not work, or maybe we could change it to be like this, has really helped me in my own thought process and growing as a game developer. So I really know how influential those opinions can be.
Yeah, I think I killed like 1 or 2 JRPG tropes in the game heavily, especially with Cell, because like in an early iteration, it was far more focused on Cell finding her parents again, and I was like, no, I don't want that, because like I was like, why does every character has to have some special inner power or some connection over parents, over some relatives, or an ancient master that makes them special above the rest. I wanted Cell to be just Cell, the human being that like gets somewhere by her own power.
Sure.
Because to me, Cell is also like, I think, my favorite character. Because she's sassy, but like sassy for a reason.
Okay, yeah.
She's a self-made girl and basically learned. I always compare it to Scrooge McDuck. She learned the hardships of life, and now she's hoarding. She's always hoarding for scrap, for the next big pay. She's always looking for these opportunities, and that is like a mix out of like normal JRPG characters and characters like Final Fantasy XIII's Lightning, who is really, really angry at everyone and always says, and I was like, maybe tune down that a bit and get a character where you can get behind it. Like, especially
Sure.
with the room before, with all the treasure chests. You have Darius basically warning you that an alarm is going. Like, maybe you should move on. But like, you still go for the chests. And like, you have the option to just leave the chests. But
Sure.
like, you'd still want to go for that. That room had to be just to have one moment where the player and Cell think alike. Where
Yeah, for
you
sure.
like discover your inner Cell.
No, I love that. I love that perspective where you're trying to develop moments where the player and the main character think in unison so that there's a little bit of like self-identification there and a little bit more attachment to the story. I think that's really important. That's great.
Yeah, if you ask me, the game is a lot about dealing what happened already. We are in a post-apocalyptic near future world, and government isn't here anymore. Like something must have happened, some war-related thing.
Sure.
And as such, you have a lot of people that are just dealing with the after effects of that. And I think the game is a lot about that. Just coming with terms with being the leftovers.
Interesting. Yeah. Are there any real world inspirations for that story, or how did you come to arrive at that conclusion for like the narrative setting?
So I will say that world events kind of made for bad timing because we
Sure.
started this over 2 years ago, and then it feels like life is imitating art to a certain extent.
Right.
I think I know Andy and Leo can answer better in terms of setting, but Pillars of Dust was a very meme-filled, lighthearted game. So we wanted to kind of do the opposite and make something that was brutally depressing and a lot more serious. So we went to the other side of the spectrum in that sense.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to go all the way too depressing, but definitely a darker theme than the previous game for sure. And there's definitely some parallels between this game and real life. And if you go through the whole thing, you'll see some. I don't know. I don't know if it's the word is allegory. I don't know. It's there are some references to real life throughout the game, but you can kind of take from it what you want. Like I'm not trying to like push any agenda or anything with it.
Sure,
It's
of
more kind of
course.
just like a comment on things, and you can kind of put it into your own perspective as you play through it. But
No, that's great. I mean, I don't know that I personally have any issue with a game with heavier themes. I think that sometimes it's really important that the media we consume and art that we create does have real world implications, and can help us process some of those difficult things. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is to make it. It doesn't have to be like super cheerful all the time, but it also has to be fun. Like you wouldn't be playing the game if you don't have fun. So that has to be the balance. So this game has a little bit of a darker theme, and some of the story is a little bit less cheerful, but at the same time, it still tries to be something that you enjoy playing.
Of course, right.
So there's some more lighthearted moments. There's some more serious moments throughout the game.
That's great. Yeah, I think striving to strike that balance is really, really great. I'm happy that there's a development team doing that. I've recently played a couple of games that were too lighthearted, but dealing with difficult themes, and it just felt very off-putting to play with something that was making light of those situations.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You don't want to make jokes out of something that's serious, because it might might rub people the wrong way. But
right. Just want to remind people in chat again that if you have questions for the game devs here, feel free to write a little message and we'll try and make sure that it gets asked. Really appreciate y'all being here and listening to the devs of For a Vast Future talk about what's going on. It's 11 o'clock, right? Or we've been streaming for about an hour. How would you feel if we took a 5-10 minute break and came back to it for another 30 minutes or so after that?
That sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Sure.
Great. All right, everybody, we'll be back soon. We're just going to take a small little break to refill our water. So go to the bathroom, get another drink, get some snacks, and we'll see you soon.
I wish we had money for Jira. Right now, we basically coordinate through a private Discord channel. Yeah, we try. We use Trello a little bit, but for the most part, I think it's just text chat, really. And we did do weekly voice chats for a while, but I think we got lazy and fell off that schedule.
It's hard to stick with any schedule for meetings and that kind of thing when, like I said, everybody's got their own stuff going on as well. That's probably one of the biggest things about it, is coordinating amongst everybody on the team, trying to convey, like, if I'm writing something in the story, but it's like, it's not necessarily clear from just the dialogue what's happening, then kind of have to have a conversation about what the goal is or whatever. So things have sort of like developed over time as sort of organically, like things have within the story have sort of developed as different people have done different things with the game. Like I was writing dialogue, and Leo was making the maps, and Josh was programming the scenes and everything and putting things together. So there definitely was it's not always as smooth as you would hope for, because and we're all in different places too, like literally different countries from each other. So it's definitely a thing that requires some trial and error and some communication. Exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure how far apart we are in terms of times of day, but definitely the team is. I mean, the four of us are across 3 countries, and then we had some other freelancers who were assisting, and they were in other countries. So it's a major collaboration between a lot of different experiences and people and time zones and everything.
So for that, yeah, I think we just saw people on Twitter and we like that art looks cool, and then we just DM them.
Yeah, there's definitely like this shopkeeper guy. I guess it's not really a shop, but this guy is something that a freelancer did. We saw his work on, I guess it was Twitter, might have been Instagram, something like that. We reached out and we were like, "Do you do any freelance work?" And they were like, "Yeah." So we kind of just organized. We had a few pieces that we wanted to be done at that level of detail, and they did it for us. And there's a few things scattered throughout the game that are that kind of thing. Yeah, I think the dialogue portraits mostly were done by Ren, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
He had done more cartoonish ones originally, and then he made them a little bit more detailed and realistic later on. Especially Garby and Searle were like very very cartoony, and I think they're still pretty cartoony, but they're a little bit more refined than they were originally. Right.
Yep.
That's definitely a reference to some older style games. I don't even know what games we were thinking of, but like for example, when you see the shopkeeper in like a portrait when you open up a shop, that's what is that a reference to? A bunch of different stuff. Shining Force, maybe. I don't know what else. Josh can probably say what other games have that type of aesthetic, but
Yeah, some of the old PC games, like really old from the 80s, did that a lot. Like the Wizardry.
maybe even what do you call them? WRPGs or whatever.
Yeah, for example, there's a really old one called Wasteland that was sort of like the literal ancestor of Fallout, and
It was like the '80s proto predecessor to Fallout.
um, so I think that was sort of absorbed. I don't know if there's like a specific influence. We did it a lot in Pillars of Dust. As my Discord avatar probably suggests, I'm a SpongeBob fan, and I always loved how they do those goofy, they call them like gross ups, where they do like a super detailed zoom in that's just a total non sequitur compared to the rest of the art style. So something that's always been funny.
Yeah, we played with Pillars of Dust. We played with the JRPG tropes, the like cliches that you see a little bit. Like we definitely went very. We focused on the idea that like in a lot of the really old RPGs like Dragon Warrior, you would walk up to literally one tile size of a town, like it's just like a tile that looks like a castle, and then you walk into it and it's like a gigantic area. We were playing around with the scope of things to some extent like that. Like, I think it's a little bit less pronounced in this game, although there's still some of that. Obviously, houses are bigger on the inside than they appear from the outside. But I think we were just in general trying to get a little bit more serious with it and not be so goofy with everything. So I think that probably made us scale back a bit.
Yeah, I think it was trying to be a little bit more serious as a general theme.
I think for me the goal was like the opposite. To try to not make it too serious. Like I think I had a hand in a lot of the really serious beats in the story. Like I like to make things a bit darker.
I unmuted myself. Hey, can you all hear me now? I am so sorry, everyone. Hello. The other people are what's important, but let me know if you can hear my mic now.
Oh, we're just rambling apropos of nothing.
Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you for letting me know that my mic was off. Is this any better? There we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mickey.
Gotta love technology.
Yep. It's way too many buttons to click in front of me right now.
Yeah, we were just theorizing the meaning of everything in existence.
Perfect. As we all should at some point or another.
I can tell from looking at this map that you're in right now that a bunch of these cars and tanks and stuff have gotten some updated graphics since this was released. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
I think
super
Kren
cool.
has been working on those most recently.
That was also one of the deviations from a typical RPG is the tiles and the perspective are a little bit different than your typical Final Fantasy look.
Sure.
It's hard to explain because I'm not an artist, but
Right. It's not top down. Is basically it's kind of like I don't know what the angle, but you're kind of you're looking down from an angle, so you can sort of
Right.
see the front and tops of some of the tiles and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's almost
Most
like you have
notably,
2.5
like the
dimensions or
walls.
something.
Yeah.
No, I think that fits this really well. I think it's hard to convey information if it's just straight top down. So, tell me more about the battle timeline. How does that get determined? Do people have intrinsic stats that determine how fast they can battle?
yeah. So I think the timeline is more a display thing than an actual system. The
Okay.
internal code is it's like the ATB system in Final Fantasy where the bar fills up.
Okay.
The only difference is the bars aren't displayed in this game and the timeline is shown instead. So it's more like
Gotcha.
a stylistic choice.
Okay.
And I think him from Something Classic was the one who came up with that idea and suggested it to us early on. Because
feels-
originally it was just bars filling up.
Sure. It does feel more intuitive to me as someone who's less familiar with JRPGs to see a portrait zip across the screen because trying to watch 5 bars go at the same time feels a little tricky.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
me it almost feels like Mario Kart or something.
Oh, yeah.
Where that reminds me of another influence that we had, which is a game called Divinity: Original Sin, which is I think it was an indie game originally released on PC, but then they did it on Xbox and everything.
Right.
I think that is how they kind of do the battle order system in that game, kinda.
Okay. Super cool.
Where like the portraits of each combatant are in order of the turn that they get to take or whatever. I don't know if it moves the same way, but it's kind of a similar idea.
Yeah, I think the sheer difference is that this is more active time as opposed to strictly turn based, so it's like
Sure.
a hybrid. And since I'm giving a lot of shout outs, I will say that Something Classic, which is sort of like the sister studio to Retro Games, they're working on a project called Quartet, and their entire battle system is heavily based off of sort of that turn order flow and swapping people in and out of battle.
Interesting.
So that's been the theme of our games, I guess.
That's awesome. What
Yeah,
was
there's
the...
definitely some yeah. So, sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say there's a lot of timing themes in some of these games. Pillars of Dust had it wasn't the timing of the battle so much as the timing of you kind of switched between characters in terms of the linear story, so it was kind of like a jumping back and forth in time situation.
Okay.
So that's kind of been a theme through these games that we've worked on.
That's really cool. I don't know. I think it's really fun to play a studio's games catalog and as a player, like picking out some of those things and realizing that there's like a lot of the thought put into common themes across them is really I don't know. It's almost like a mini puzzle or something. It feels fun to discover.
Yeah,
Right, you can sort of see how things develop and how things get expanded on as you go through the catalog.
Yeah,
and yeah, it's interesting. And we're a little bit of a unique situation in that I would say my main studio, as it were, is something classic, uh, and we kind of decided to make retro games as an offshoot for the more experimental or shorter timeline type of games.
Okay.
So there's a lot of continuity between the two studios because it's a lot of same people, but we found sort of a niche and design philosophy that really works for us, and it's the whole JRPG for people with jobs idea.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that. So something
Something
classic is the sister studio, and then I'm gonna type this out in chat. I think it's retro
Quartet.
games. Oh, sorry,
Is
Quartet.
Quartet's the flagship game of something classic.
Okay.
Definitely worth checking out for fans of For a Vast Future.
And then,
Yeah, so Sonic Classic and Retro Games are the two studios.
and retro is RETREAUX.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
None of us are French either, so it was funny.
I like it.
The timeline kind of was something classic released Shadows of Adam in 2015.
I think it was 17.
No, it was before that. Because I was, based on when I was living, where I was living at the time. 16, but
I think that did have 17. It was started with 16. My life like we're together.
yeah. Well, something classic did Shadows of Adam, and then in 2020, Pillars of Dust came out. 2022, For a Vast Future, and then something classic is shooting for, I guess, 2023 for Quartet, I think.
And also my familiar that I'm working on. And those Quartet, my familiar, fantastic looking. So I can't hype this up enough.
Heck yeah.
So much you'll not want to future after looking at them.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're cutting in and out a little bit, Josh.
Let's see if I can.
But yeah, if you look at the games, you'll see that Shadows of Adam is definitely like a very faithful, polished interpretation of those like SNES era
Sure.
JRPG games, maybe Chrono Trigger type of era, and then the retro games. The two things that we've done have been a bit more, less smaller scope, smaller team, smaller budget, that kind of stuff.
Okay, great.
We also make design choices or spicier decisions. You never know what you're
Spicier
gonna get.
decisions. No, that's really good. I think that's really cool that you have something that can, like a studio that you know is gonna follow more of a formula, and still innovate within that, but something that you know is gonna be somewhat successful, and then a sister studio that can try new things and push the boundaries a little bit more. I feel like that's really, really cool.
And with retro games have been more aggressive, and so I know Shadows of Adam and Quartet have been very long projects, like 5 years or more
Oh dang, yeah.
at the time. And Pillars of Dust, I think we developed in the calendar year. It
Okay,
was
yeah.
a hectic year, but
Yeah, Josh is still cutting out a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely a much shorter development cycle for Pillars of Dust and for a Vast Future. Even though this game feels like we've been working on it for a while, it's only been, 2 years maybe. But I think another thing that we've been talking about is like we're kind of jealous of games like, I don't know if you've heard of Hylix, but it's like
No, I
a
haven't.
very strange game that I think was might have been RPG Maker. But anyway, we're kind of fascinated with those like completely off the wall, really weird type of like almost avant-garde games.
Sure.
I don't know if I have the artistic creativity to be able to do something like that successfully, but we definitely try to do something a little bit stranger with this project and the last one.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Looks like Mickey is asking, when you're looking for someone new to work with, do you go to your game publisher or do you generally find that person yourself?
I don't know if I'm starting it in a route, but I think we most internally are community Discord.
Okay.
Right.
So you
Like
go
within the something classic universe, sort of.
Okay, sure.
Like we talked about, like Leo got involved because he was highly involved in Pillars of Dust and testing and that kind of stuff, and kind of made sense that he get more involved in the next project. And then I think Kren is somebody who Joss has been working with for a long time. Like they've worked together on projects since 20 years ago maybe. So it's I don't know if there's any one way to answer the question, but it's definitely like sort of like people kind of just get involved organically from being involved through previous stuff that we've done.
That's great. And I mean, that means that you're choosing people that you've built rapport with and are trustworthy. So,
Yeah, for sure. But like I said, we also like reached out to some people to do some art who we just saw on Twitter and we thought their stuff was good. So, there's no necessarily specific way that we decide who we're working with until it happens, I guess.
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you ever put out a call like, hey, we need an artist to do X number of things for us. We're willing to commission you. Or has it all been like a DM to someone that you think is worthwhile talking to?
I think that we've done that.
Yeah.
We did that with testers. We like put out a call for testers and
Okay.
that kind of stuff. But I remember specifically we like sent out a poll for people who wanted to get involved in that process.
Sure. If people wanted to be notified, if you were ever looking for more testers for future games or things like that, where would they best find you? Or if they would just want to hear about like news about upcoming games coming out, where could they find you to receive news about that?
Definitely Twitter's and Discord for more immediate updates.
Okay.
Some Discord, that is.
If you
Twitter, Retro Games, and Something Classic are both good follows, and then the Something Classic Discord is like a really good place to talk to people, talk to the whole dev team, basically. Like everybody who's involved in Something Classic is on there, so
okay.
you can talk to anybody.
If one of you DM me the Discord link for Something Classic and Retro Games, I would love to slap it in chat so people can go follow.
Yeah, I'll send you it.
Sweet. I'm gonna grab Something Classic's Twitter handle as well. There we go. And here's the invite for Something Classic.
Yeah, and Retro Games is on Something Classic.
Okay, great. So Something Classic and Retro Games are both there.
We have our own little, I don't know what you want to call it, channel? Is that what?
Channel, yeah, for sure.
Category, yeah. We're like a little subsection.
You can go and talk about your favorite retro games moments.
all two of them.
Heck yeah. Super cool. And then we were talking a little bit over the break, but it sounds like For Vast Future is set to release on Steam early November, and then console release later after that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the plan at the moment.
Great. That's really soon. I'm really excited about that.
Yes.
Do you have any
Finally.
any knowledge or thoughts about price point and hours it would take to play?
I think for hours, probably what, like 8 to 10 maybe to do the whole story for this game.
Great.
Yeah, give or take.
Depends on how careful you are and meticulous you are in exploration and that kind of thing.
Sure, of course.
And price point, I don't want to lock myself into anything.
Yeah.
But
Don't
maybe
say
like
a
10
number
bucks.
if it's not something that's settled yet.
I'd say the
Probably
10 to $12 range.
$9.99.
Okay, great.
I don't know for sure. Honestly, I think we're still figuring that out, but
Sure.
somewhere in that range.
I think pricing has got to be one of the trickiest things to determine. I don't ever want to be doing that myself. I definitely would be looking for advice for that sort of conversation.
It'll
Right.
definitely be cheaper than in AAA titles.
Perfect.
You got that situation where on the one hand you don't want to be more expensive than games that have like, huge budgets and hundreds of people working on them. At the same time, you don't want to price yourself so cheap because I think people will just interpret your game as being kind of just like a throwaway project, and I don't think that's
Right.
correct either. So
You have to sell the value of your game a little bit with the price so that people don't think it's trash.
Well,
one man's trash,
It's another man's trash.
but I think that we actually got some feedback when we were pricing Pillars of Dust, where we were going to price at a certain price, and people were like, "Excuse me, there's a baby in the room with me." People gave us some feedback saying people aren't going to take your game seriously if you price it too low. So
No, that totally makes sense.
it's the whole pricing debate is extremely controversial. And there is some truth that if you undervalue your game, people will sort of perceive that and assume you're just doing like an asset flip or a generic RPG Maker game or, like a cynical cash grab. But then if you
Sure.
overprice it, then obviously that's not good either.
No, that makes sense. Great. Do you have any other closing thoughts or things you want to say about the game?
Yeah, I mean, we put a lot of hard work into it, and we hope everyone likes it when it comes out. There's the demo on Steam, which is a tad outdated now that I think about it, since it was released in February, and we've done a lot of internal updates since then, so we
Sure.
might have to update the demo as well. But yeah, we put a lot of hard work into it. We tried a lot of things that we think are unique to this type of game, and if you're into classic JRPGs, definitely give it a try.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've had a blast playing this. I've been trying to keep dialogue progressing slowly so that people watching can try and get a sense of the story. But yeah, definitely go play it for yourself. It's free. And if you follow those Twitter accounts or join the Discord, I'm sure that you will get an update if they update the demo. Don't think that y'all would do that silently.
right, yeah, for sure. Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to play the game. We appreciate having a chance to talk to you about it. Definitely feels good to talk about it after spending 2 years only talking amongst ourselves, basically trying to figure out how to make this game happen.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you talking to me as someone who's getting started in game development. I really feel like I've learned even from our conversation here, and I'm looking forward to going back and watching the VOD. I always learn extra stuff when I'm a listener, not just a participant. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to hang out with us, and we'll try and do something like this again in the future. I love doing these dev interviews on stream. I think it's really valuable to humanize game development. So, yeah, once again, just thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.